We hear a lot of perspectives on the Mankind podcast. Inclusion of a guest is not an endorsement of their views, and the opinions expressed here do not always represent the mission or values of the Mankind Project USA.
Looks like the rain has gone.
G'day and welcome to another episode of the Mankind Podcast, the show where we break the molds of modern manhood to prove there's more than one way to be a man. I'm your host, Brandon Clift, and today's episode is all about how to turn life's greatest tragedies into triumph, how to go from the deepest depths to the highest highs, and why it is important that we in life go through those struggles, go through those pains, experience the hurt. Now, to properly introduce this conversation, I wanted to introduce all of you to Rabbi Noam Raucher. Now, Noam is, as I said, a rabbi. He is also a life coach, living out on the West Coast, where he encourages his clients to take a walk with him. That through that process of getting into the body and getting out of nature, rather than ask you where you are in life, more so the question of why are you here? I found my time with Noam really interesting, and his approach to be really neat, being able to move between both worlds of both the Jewish faith and as a life coach. And you might be surprised to know that a lot of his clients actually aren't Jewish. So his perspectives are unique. His experiences, however, I believe are what give him his ability to have the clarity to get straight to the point. And you're going to get that through this interview. He answers the questions very quickly, very pointed, with great eloquence. I was in awe of this man's command of semantics by the time we wrapped this conversation. And I believe you're going to get a ton of value as Noam and I discuss the importance of struggle, the importance of pain, the importance of experiencing loss, grief, shame, fear, anger, that these experiences that make us feel like the absolute pits, well, we can't see a way out. Those experiences themselves are so valuable and create the fertile soil in which we can then grow to our greatest heights. Anywho, you might be able to tell I'm excited for this one, so I am going to shut up. I'm going to let you get into it, and I hope you enjoy this episode with Rabbi Noam Raucher. Enjoy. Noam, my friend, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Brandon. It's a pleasure to be here.
So this is the first time I have interviewed a rabbi before.
Oh, really?
Which is pretty cool. And I have to say, you don't necessarily meet my preconceptions of what a rabbi would look like. I don't want to sound naive in saying that, even though I do sound very naive in saying that, but very California vibe, kind of surfy vibe. It's neat to have you on the show and learn from your perspectives and your experiences. So, but for our guests and our listeners who can't see you right now, tell us a little bit about yourself and we'll get stuck into this interview.
Wonderful. I appreciate that, Brandon. Thank you very much. And I certainly appreciate, your questions about me being a rabbi and in that way and not fitting those, typical understandings of what they might look like. I have no problem dealing with people with misconceptions in that way. And it's certainly being challenged by them. I enjoy being a rabbi. It's certainly something of a vocation for me, a calling, right? Much more than just a profession or a job or something like that. And it's brought me a lot of really wonderful meaning and perspective over the last 15 years that I've been practicing at it. It's also opened me up to a bunch of different pathways in terms of working with men in spirituality and anyone who's facing a spiritual challenge of any particular kind in their life. Certainly dealing with divorce and loss and family life, all those things come into play. And so being a rabbi has really been a wonderful catalyst for me to think differently about the world, and most especially to think, deeply about life and to imagine how sacred life could really be if we ask the right questions.
Something I value in the conversations we've had since we first connected is oftentimes I meet people that are part of a particular religion, and this is definitely not everyone, but some I have met have had quite a myopic view of the world, right? Only through one lens. And one thing that I have enjoyed about our conversations and I've witnessed in you, just through your website and your podcast, that you don't look from a single lens. You tend to be able to step into many different worlds and see things from many different perspectives, which I think is going to provide us with a lot of entertainment through this interview. As I said prior to us getting on this interview, is my job is to challenge you.
Yeah, please do. Bring it on.
Bring it on. Perfect. Well,
I'll take you and life's challenges in one full sweep. Let's do it.
There you go. I feel like I have this like Mortal Kombat thing in my mind where I'm like standing across from a rabbi and we're ready to throw it.
Well, hopefully nobody's saying anything like finish him.
Yeah.
Right? Throwing a big hook at you or anything like that. That's not what this is. It's not Mortal Kombat. Oh my gosh.
It's not Mortal Kombat. That's wonderful. So for those at home that want to find out more about Rabbi Raucher here, you can go to noamraucher.com, or as well as there's 2 podcasts that he hosts, the Hugh Man podcast. Again, links will all be in the show notes, and Jews with Tattoos. So that if those if those titles give you any insight into the kind of bloke we're going to be connecting with today, be sure to check those out. So first things first, mate, what does the life of a rabbi look like for you right now?
I appreciate that. It looks, I think, similar to what a lot of people are experiencing, going through this pandemic. Certainly for people who are divorced, right? Single parenting and being lucky enough to, be a single parent with 50-50 custody. It's got its ups and its downs. It's got its blessings and it's got its curses as well. And it's got its beautiful days and its ugly days. But being a rabbi, I feel like it's giving me an opportunity to study life, right? And ask the questions, or at least embrace the questions that life presents me, whether it's a sunny day or an ugly day, or it's an up or a down, or it's a blessing or a curse. Being a rabbi has given me the tools to say, well, what can I really learn from this? What can I really pull out of this, rather than being overwhelmed by it in one way or another, even if it's good or if it's bad. But to say that there's something that can be learned from this, something sacred about it, is really what gets me going and also excites me about this journey that we're on in life. That it's not all bad, it's not all good, it's a little bit of mixture of both. And there's really something to be learned, I think, from all of it.
That's a powerful and helpful perspective to have, especially as someone who would be deemed like a spiritual leader and a spiritual guide. Not to mention that you are also a certified coach, but to give that perspective to go, hey, there's good, there's bad, there's in between. We are facing this right now. What does your next step look like, right?
All the more so.
Get put in front of the right foot. So I'm curious of where your interest comes in and how you've actually, no, let's go to the beginning. What was the calling for you to become a rabbi?
Oh, that's a great question. I grew up in a synagogue, right? I'm still good friends with the rabbi that I grew up with. Grew up with Jewish teachings around my house and Jewish spirituality in my community and in the relationships I had in my community as well. And for me, it took some time. It was something of a bug that I got bitten by in college as I was leaving. I had friends who were interested in becoming rabbis, and I wasn't sure why that was something that was so particularly interesting to them, where, I was only really interested in psychology. I was thinking about getting a PhD or a medical degree in psychiatry and opening up a shop somewhere and telling people to blame all their problems on their parents. And I took some time off, right? I said, I need to really be sure about all that. And so after I graduated college, I worked for a Jewish organization in San Diego. I worked for Hillel, just doing student outreach and whatnot there. And then I took another 2 years off to work for the Yale Psychiatric Hospital as well. And that was some of the most meaningful work I did. And in the midst of all that, I was doing a lot of things that I think a rabbi does, convening community, offering teachings, right, within the context of the psychiatric hospital, providing counseling as well and support to people, and also facing a lot of difficult challenges, or at least facing those challenges with people, not only their psychological challenges as well, their mental health challenges, but also challenges with addiction of some kind, of a substance abuse. It was a dual diagnosis unit. So we saw a lot of people who were troubled by any number of things, and being able to walk with them in those moments, to be with them, I think helped, enhance that calling, or made it clear. It said that that was something I wanted to do. I wanted to be with people during challenging times. I wanted to be able to convene community. And I also wanted to see people through this thing called life, not just have a circumstantial, event with them when they would come to my office and they would talk and then they would leave, right? I wanted something more of a relationship. I wanted something more of a community to be part of, and a community to help build and lead. And so that's where the idea of being a rabbi really spoke to me. So I did some research and I applied and I moved out and I went and I did some great learning along the way. And then I became a rabbi.
I think that's what I pull out from what you just shared, is that the vessel didn't matter in a way, so long as there was a vessel for you to be a part of the work that calls to you.
Yeah.
And clearly it's to be in service and to guide people through life's many ups and downs. I believe that's a huge layer that we connected on in the beginning of just starting to chat to see if it'd be a good fit to have you on the show, which was how varied your interests are in the people that you work with and the people that you help. And it's very interesting. It's very cool, your means of guiding and coaching people, which is taking them on walks, taking them on hikes.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
I think there's a tangibility to that. There's something more than just having a conversation and sitting on a couch or through a Zoom screen as it's happening these days.
And that's the point. I mean, I think, we're all creatures of human interaction, right? The Zoom or whatever platform you're using only takes you so far, right? It's part of the reason I think people have gotten frustrated with the pandemic, because they're also got Zoom fatigue. And it's one of the only ways that you can literally see people face to face. And, at least we're getting to a point in the United States and maybe in other places in the world where this whole thing is becoming more manageable, and you can be in closer circumstances with other people more easily and more confidently in that way. But walking certainly is not just about being in the same place with someone, right? That's only part of it. I think that's the baseline. You're literally in company with someone else. So you're not going for this walk alone, but all the more so it literally gets you moving. And it's not really a matter of just kind of physically moving. It's a way of internally moving, right? Of feeling and getting past this internal stuckness that some of us may really feel. And so if you can get out, you can go for a walk, you can go for a hike, you can envision yourself moving through whatever it is that you're going through, to know that you're not really stuck physically, right? Let's understand that. We're not stuck. We're not enslaved physically. Surely some people in the world are, but for the clients that I deal with, we're not really stuck physically, right? We're stuck emotionally. We're stuck psychologically. We're stuck spiritually. And how do we get past that? We need a mechanism that actually pushes us past it, to remind us that the stuckness is in the first place internal, not external, but all the more so that we can get past it. Now we have steps to do that. And the external walking and the external hiking helps us remind that we can go on an internal walk, an internal hike, to get through whatever that stuckness is that we're feeling.
Thank you for saying that. I had a sports psychologist when I was younger and competing a lot, and he would tell me that, I thought he was there to help me with my head, but he was able to help me connect with my emotions in a great way. And he would say, Brandon, your emotional stress is just sitting below your physical. And because I would wonder why at the edge of my physical comfort and then at the edge of my physical ability, I would just bust out crying.
Yeah.
Or I would get that aha moment. And I've learned to channel that in different ways. These days, going for a run is like therapy.
I remember, you bring that up. I apologize for cutting you off, but I remember I was living in Israel and I experienced my first loss. It was one of my best friends who died. He died of cancer, and he left behind 3 beautiful kids and a beautiful wife, and a beautiful life and a family that he had, and a community too. And just felt so distraught over it. And I remember running was one of the best things that got me through it. Just the habit of getting out of the bed and going for a run and working up a sweat, like that in and of itself, the baseline. But I remember talking about this clearly with a therapist, that I started crying in the middle of the run one time, and maybe it was the music that was coming up. And sometimes when you listen to the right music, right, there have been research on this, when you listen to the right music and exercise, it really moves you along, right? The cadence helps, the rhythm and the beats help. If you listen to the tune of Indiana Jones, right, da 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 da, right, you really get moving. And I can't honestly tell you what song it was that brought it up, but I remember grieving in that moment. I remember crying as I was running and thinking it was the weirdest thing in the world. Like, how could that possibly happen? But it was the fact that I think that it was the music. It was kind of everything in time that I was maybe moving past that moment. I was moving through the stages of grief, and I needed to cry at that moment. I needed the run to help me kind of distract me and get me out of my head, right? My brain at the baseline was just saying, put one foot in front of another and follow this direction, and don't hit people on the sidewalk as you go, and remember to dodge that trash can, that there was nothing else I could do. My brain wasn't in the way of blocking my emotions in a way that allowed me to open up and to just kind of start crying in the middle of that run. And I cried all the way home on the run, and then remembered talking about it with my therapist, and just feeling a sense of relief. That moment had come, that I was able to kind of see things differently, but it needed to happen in that physical action of all of it.
I mean, that makes so much sense, to be able to let people move through the emotion. It's a distraction outside of just like telling someone that they need to think a different way. It's no, let's move. And so I think you've combined two elements, the coaching element and just the physical element of just going out for a walk. And I just love your call to action is come walk with me.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
Take a walk with me. I think that, you talk a lot about the hero's journey, right? And here at the Mankind Project, we love Joseph Campbell. We love the hero's journey. We love all the different elements. And one of the necessary players in any hero's journey is the guide. Yeah. Right. That kind of grandfatherly or grandmotherly energy to be able to put the hand on the shoulder and say, let's go for a walk, I think is really powerful.
Well, and sadly, a lot of us go through journeys in our life without having a guide, right? We just have to. Yeah. We don't deliberately pick up a guide, or we don't run into one along the way. Mm-hmm. And you think about how necessary those people can be, just to remind you of where you've come from and where you're going, and to tell you what they see about you, whether that's good or bad, light or dark, shadow or gold, right? All that stuff is really helpful to have an outside perspective. We don't grow in isolation. Right. There's a big movement out there that says, you need to go out there alone to find yourself. Well, you also find yourself in company with other people, because people can remind you of your surroundings. They can remind you of the context that you're in, and they can remind you, most importantly, of the things that you don't see about yourself, all your blind spots. And that's actually crucial to going out there on a journey. You can wander all you want. You can get lost. You can learn about yourself in the way. But the only way you're going to grow is if you have a partner to go deeper with you into that exploration and journey towards truth of who you are. Yeah. That external catalyst that just helps, just that little nudge out of the nest, I think can be really powerful. Well, and I think that's what works for us in our Mankind groups, right? In our I groups that we meet, right? We have other guys there who are willing to speak honestly to us, right? And hold up a mirror. And we know that it's a non-judgmental and it's a loving environment. So you know that you can inherently trust it. But what you have to be open to is just knowing that someone else sees something that you don't. Mate, you've got a fantastic command of semantics. I appreciate that. It's what comes with being a rabbi. You learn how to talk. Hopefully I do it well, yeah. Yeah, no, you certainly do. I love intersections, right? These phases of life. We could have this interview tomorrow and it could be a vastly different interview depending on stages of life. Yeah. And as you shared, you're involved in the Mankind Project and sitting in men's circles and groups, and, masculinity is something that intrigues you a lot, right? And that you do a lot of coaching around. I first want to make find the distinction. So if I'm looking for a coach or someone to guide me through a challenge, someone to walk with, my mind doesn't necessarily first go to rabbi. Right. Right. As it could be whatever identity, gay, straight, black, white, atheist, Jewish, right? I don't think rabbi necessarily each time, but where does the intersection lie for you? What does being a rabbi, what perspectives and insights does that give you as a coach? Yeah.
to work with people who don't identify as Jewish?
Oh, that's a great question, especially since some of my clients aren't Jewish. Yeah, most are, some of them aren't. And I think for the ones who aren't, they see a real kind of, spiritual technology involved in working with the rabbi. That is to say, we're not therapists, right? So we're not talking about necessarily what's going on in your brain, right? And we're not necessarily talking about why you are or anything like that. And we're not medical doctors. We're not focused on what's going on in your body and the possible physical ailments that you could be facing. But we do talk about where you are, right? That's the first real question that I think God poses to humanity in the Hebrew Bible, right? And in the Bible in general. Forget about, Israelites going through an exodus in Egypt. Forget about any type of particular Jewish narrative, but the first few chapters of the Hebrew Bible are universal to humanity. And the first question that God asks humanity, asks Adam and Eve, is, where are you? Right? Plain and simple, where are you? And it's not about physical location, right? Let's assume that God is all powerful and God sees all, right? We don't have to get into a deep theological conversation about that. That could last for 3 podcasts. But the point is to say that, if God knows where we are physically, God really wants a better understanding of where we see ourselves spiritually, right? And only we can really locate that. That is not anything that God can tell us. God cannot reach that far into our souls and really understand, at least not from my perspective. But from what I can tell, God really wants to know, and what we all really want to know, is where are we in life, and how is life going, and what direction are we headed in? And so that's kind of the perspective that I take as a rabbi and a spiritual coach. It's the where are you, not the why are you, and not the how are you feeling. Those are important. Don't get me wrong. I don't dismiss those. But where are you in the midst of this crazy thing we call life? Where are you in the midst of this pandemic, right? What's that like for you? Are you lost and wandering like a lot of other people, or are you enjoying it? Part of me enjoyed the quarantine because I'm an introvert, right? I like the time alone. And I think I was able to withstand that much more so than other people. So if a coach of mine, a spiritual coach or a rabbi of mine come to me and said, where are you during this whole thing? I would have said, you know what? I'm not doing too bad, right? I enjoy the time alone. That's been really good for me. But at the same time, right, creature of relationships and habit, I enjoy being with people too. So it's not like it was perfect. But nonetheless, being able to see as people going through a journey in life is really, I think, the perspective that a rabbi or any type of spiritual leader brings. Where are you in this whole thing, and where are you interested in going?
So I can see now the link between your perspective as a rabbi and how that translates into your coaching for those that are Jewish or not. Are there any expectations placed upon you with that title that you feel like constricts how you can approach guiding someone through your coaching and in these walks?
Oh, sure. There are always communal demands and communal structures that people expect you to follow as a rabbi, that they expect you to say certain things. There's almost a loyalty quality to it, and a fear of being canceled as well if you don't say exactly this thing that people are expecting you to say. Yeah. For me, I work with people individually and specifically with them, not based on anything else, not based on any other type of societal concerns or anything like that other people might think are important for me to say or do as a rabbi. When someone approaches me as a spiritual coach looking for spiritual guidance, right? And if especially they're looking for a rabbi in that way, I'm only relating to them how they would want me to relate to them, not how anyone else would want me to relate to them. So that's what my guidance is primarily based on, the one individual that I'm working with, and not about what other types of communal standards or societal demands there might be.
Again, well said. I imagine potentially in the early days, right, being a fresh new rabbi on the block, that you probably felt like you had to play by those rules and those expectations.
Well, I think that you still do need to play by those rules occasionally, right? On a communal level, if you want to be heard and you want to be seen and you want to be understood, you have to find a way to speak to a lot of different people at once. And sometimes that means you don't speak as authentically or as sincerely as you may like in order to really be received, right, in the way that's necessary, because you are a leader in those moments. And I think that's what people attach to it. You may be ordained, right? This may be an act of service, but it's also an act of leadership. And people want to see their leaders as being unifying figures. So, what does it really mean to work with someone individually? It means you don't necessarily need to be a leader to them. It means you need to help them recognize their own leadership. And so in that way, it's about following them, right? They may be walking with me, but I'm following them along the path. So, I enjoy that opportunity to work individually with people much more so than on a communal level, because at least then there's a clear direction in which we're going in.
Yeah, that's coaching one-on-one, right? Having them witness within themselves.
Absolutely.
What it is that they're seeking, so they're not just putting it on you. So you don't end up just being this central figure in a community that people can just run to when they have a problem. You got to give that power to them.
And it's also not about having all the answers, right? I don't want to have all the answers. I can't possibly have all the answers, right? If I had all the answers, then why would I continue studying, right? For them, for the people I work with, it's about asking the questions with them and exploring it, but not giving the answers, right? They're the ones who give the answers, and we entertain them together. But they're the ones who have to come up with the answers, and I'm happy to be there as part of the process. But I love not having to give the answers. And most of the time as a rabbi, you fall into a scholarly role, right? You come, you teach a class, everyone will ask challenging questions, and they'll expect the rabbi to know it. And very rarely have I seen colleagues say something like, I don't know, or I'm not sure about that answer, right? Because they have to reinforce the idea of being a scholar in that way. That's what it means to be a leader, too, in the Jewish community. Again, as a coach, as a spiritual coach, I'm perfectly capable and happy saying, I don't know. But that's the whole purpose of it, right? Is that you say, I don't know together, and that opens everything up to a far more expansive place, I think.
Then the opportunities become endless. So that's when you can break out of the linear path that is expected for so many to be able to go, hey, there are a myriad of options here. I remember a powerful sermon growing up. I grew up Anglican, and our preacher Stu, who was just he broke the mold, I think, in many ways, just because he was very relatable. It wasn't sit down, listen to me. It was way more inquisitive. And I remember he did this sermon that was around letting go, and he was talking about how so much of his life as a pastor was to tell people, you got to let go and let God come in and take over and steer the wheel and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, and then I realized the same people kept coming to me all the time with the same problems. And I kept saying, let go, eventually I had to start saying, get off your backside and do the work. God's not going to do the heavy lifting for you. Pick up the tools, get to work. And it was so empowering to see, he's not fitting the mold. He's not fitting the bill of what I expected from someone in his position. I could remove my expectations of what that looks like. And personally, I just thought he was more cool after that.
Right. Well, it's funny that you say, that the sermon of letting go really stood out to you. I mean, that's a really powerful message. And I don't think, if we're talking from a faith-based perspective, I don't think faith is about certainty. I think faith is about uncertainty, right? Eric Fromm says that the quest for certainty blocks the search for meaning. But it's uncertainty, and it's that uncertainty that's the very condition that impels people to unfold their powers. That's what faith is about, right? With respect to all religions, right, we are here on earth as human beings, right? And we don't have all the answers. Nobody has all the answers. But the goal, I think, is to embrace the uncertainty that life provides us, because then we see a truer reflection of ourself. And that's what I think faith is. It's accepting the fact that there is uncertainty in life, and yet there is still a power that we all have to do something about that. And we can find what our powers are once we embrace that faith, once we embrace that sense of uncertainty about life. It allows us to move forward knowing much more about who we are and what we're capable of.
There you go. Back to the hero's journey.
Right? There you go.
That crossing the threshold. You've had the calling. You've had the refusal. I don't want to do it. It's too scary.
That's right.
The guide comes along, puts their hand on your shoulder and goes, are you ready for an adventure? Are you ready to see what you're truly capable of? And then that's your choice. Do you step into the hero's journey, or do you stay in the ordinary world?
It's funny. What's clear, I think, about many of the biblical characters is that they might all have a specific physical location that they're moving towards, right? A direction. You've got to go to this place, right? Jonah, you've got to go to Nineveh, right? But Jonah ends up in the whale, which is a huge part of the hero's journey and that myth that you're talking about, being in the belly of the whale. He doesn't know that he's going to end up there in the process. He knows he needs to go to a physical destination, Nineveh, but he doesn't know what's going to happen to him along the way. And that's the uncertainty that I think we're talking about. It's what happens along the way between where we are and the destination that we're trying to get to.
Noam, let's go a layer deeper.
Let's do that.
Speaking about what's expected of someone with a title like you have, tell us a little bit about your journey thus far, experiencing loss and challenge. Because I want to speak to the nuances there of not just what was going on in your head, but what was going on in your heart. And you've given me some examples in previous conversations, but what's standing out the most for you in relation to your experience of loss and what went through your head as a rabbi going through that?
Yeah, I appreciate that. So for me, I lost my job and then I lost my family. And prior to that, I had lost a friend. And they were all in the context of being a rabbi. The loss of a friend happened in rabbinical school. Obviously, the loss of a job happened while I was a rabbi and still am a rabbi, but employed as a rabbi, employed as a pulpit rabbi. And then loss of a family as well happened in the context of being a rabbi. And so there are any number of challenges I faced. I mean, I had a lot of angry questions with God when I lost my friend. Just a lot of brewing underneath there, a lot of doubt involved as well. Needed to also realign my understanding and my conception of God in that process as well, or else I was going to go crazy. When I lost my job, it was a matter of, am I a failure at this? Right? Nobody loses their job as a rabbi, which certainly isn't true. Rabbis lose their jobs all the time for lots of different reasons. But I certainly wondered if I was a failure at that, right? Why didn't they like me that much? Why didn't they want me around anymore? That sort of thing. And certainly losing my marriage in the context of being a rabbi felt like a great moment of shame in some ways. I mean, faith-based communities are centered around the idea of the unified family, right? Of having families to help pass on their traditions and celebrate life, right? That's where the greatest value of sex comes in when it comes to faith, is through procreation. And so now that you don't have a family, what are you possibly doing with your time? And what are you going to do with what you have left in front of you? And how can you possibly promote Jewish values if you yourself aren't married? Right? Your family is broken in that way. What did you do to screw that up? And how come as a rabbi you couldn't see that coming and do something about it?
Where in your life are you standing at a crossroads? What is the resistance that's holding you back? There is a circle of brothers waiting to meet you and stand with you in facing your next step. That is what the online Crossroads course from the Mankind Project USA is about. Facing your resistance and stepping into your brilliance. See the show notes for details.
Being a rabbi or being a faith leader of any kind, right, is not synonymous with being a superhero. And it's not synonymous with being all-powerful. And it's not synonymous with being a mind reader of any kind or a magician of any kind, right? You might do great, deep spiritual work with people, but nothing's under your control, certainly not any more so than for anyone else. And so for me, it was a matter of reminding that of myself, that even though I'm a rabbi and I've taken on this role of being a spiritual leader and that this is a calling for me to do great, deep spiritual work with people, I'm still a human being in and of myself. And that requires love and care and comfort, just like anyone else deserves. And so the losses that I had sustained in that whole time period, and I'm sure future losses that I will sustain, were moments of real uncertainty for me, just like we were talking about, right? As far as I'm concerned, my path was set. I had a good idea of who I was, of what I wanted to do, and the job that I had. And yet a lot of that got just kind of ripped out from underneath me, and I needed to figure out again from a place of uncertainty exactly what my powers were. And so in some ways, it was a great reminder of just how strong and resilient I could be, how creative I could be, and in that way, very much so, how beautiful I am internally and externally. And so I needed to see that. I needed very much in some ways to have those experiences so that I could be reminded just how powerful I really am.
Clearly, you've done 12 rounds with Tyson.
Oh gosh.
on all of that, to be able to speak so clearly on your experience. I mean,
well, that's the whole wrestling match, isn't it? Right.
Yeah.
That's why we go through those ordeals, right? The I groups that we're in, they help mimic those ordeals for people so that we can remind ourselves just how strong we are. And that's what attracted me to the Mankind Project, even before I went through the initiation, right? My weekend in Washougal, Oregon. I attended an I group local to my house, and I saw just amazing ordeals that men went through and thought, I need something like that. There's a great quote from Fight Club where Brad Pitt says to Edward Norton's character, how much can you know about yourself if you've never been in a fight? They're talking about the physical ones, which is why they start Fight Club, which is a distorted view of men's groups.
Yeah.
But how much can you know about yourself if you've never really been in a fight means that you need to engage it. You need to engage whatever's coming your way because it's going to show you something about yourself, something that you never really knew you had in you.
Yeah. Well, and therein lies another great benefit of loss, is the self-awareness that you've gained from that experience to inform you for the next round. See, that's the thing, that whether it's in a religious context or in the workplace, political, when people at a level of status or people are in a position of leadership behave in a way as if they've arrived. There they are. There's nowhere else to go because they're at the pinnacle. That's so disheartening to look at that person and all their flaws and go, oh, that's the ceiling.
Right.
Whereas I want the guide that has been through the hero's journey that I'm on multiple times, right? I want the person with your perspective and your insights to guide me as I go through my relationship challenges, loss of a job. That's why I think it's so important to embrace opportunities like this. I bet you in the moment, losing your job, losing your friend, losing your marriage, I bet in the moment you weren't going, wow, what an opportunity.
No, not at all. Not at all. Those are my ugliest moments. You don't want to see me in those moments. There's no question. There's nothing graceful about it. But I think we all go through that, right? I think that's part and parcel of it, that when there's loss of any kind, whether that be of family or relationships or jobs or material possessions, there is a grieving element to it. That's totally fair and that's totally human to be upset about it, right? You had something and now it's not there anymore. And to start, that creates a great deal of confusion. It's like, what the heck does this even mean? I remember, my rabbi as a young person, when I was dealing with the grief of a lost friend, he reminded me about something that two Jewish authors had said about one another. I can't remember if it was Saul Bellow who said it about another Jewish author or another Jewish author who said it about Saul Bellow. But either the point was saying that, when your grandparents die, there's something that makes sense about that. That's kind of the way that the world is supposed to work, right? The older people die before you do. And when you experience the loss of a friend, that throws everything out of whack. It throws out your whole conception about how the world is supposed to work. And I think the same is true for any number of things. We have a tendency of thinking that only old things die. That's not the case. Or old things get lost. That's not the case, right? Everything can get lost, right? Everything can die. And so to understand that we are going through a confusing moment that can bring up a lot of emotions, particularly sadness and anger as a result, to want to take control of that confusion can be really helpful to know where we are. But in those moments, I don't think I would have been able to really tell you that. I needed to be in those moments deeply. I need to experience those moments. I needed to express those moments and get them out, or else I was going to be dwelling in them forever, or else I was still going to be back in those earlier stages of grief where no one's supposed to bother you, where you're supposed to be left alone just to be with yourself, right? And just kind of go through that experience. And then when I could pick myself up and say, okay, what am I going to do about this now? That's when I really needed people. That's when I needed community. That's when I needed friends. That's when I needed teachers and mentors and a therapist and an I group and all those things to remind me of exactly how strong I was and what I was capable of. But in those earlier moments, it was definitely not beautiful. It was ugly. and I hit every branch on the ugly tree on the way down, right? Just kind of the way it goes. But you pick yourself up and you can still realize that there's beauty in the world and in you too.
Beautifully said, mate. Oh God, I want to take a walk with you now.
Let's do that.
Let's do that. Next time I'm out in California. Yeah. This is really ringing true for me right now.
You must have experienced that there were, particularly as times as an athlete, when you grew in a certain way, you could see some of the work, but I'm willing to bet a lot of that was mental.
Well, yeah, hence the sports psychologist that I needed when I was competing, because I would just hit these ceilings and I couldn't catch that trick on the bar. I just couldn't, there were certainly things getting in the way that weren't just technique based. But like, speaking of loss, I mean, yeah, like I've been very open about this on the podcast. In 2015, I was unsuccessful in killing myself. And that point of my life was in many ways a death and a rebirth that I had to go through. There was a chaos that I had to sit with, but I could not get stuck there. Right? It's go face the dragon in the dungeon, in the cave, face the dragon, not knowing what the outcome's going to be, not know it's there, but never face it and hope it never comes out. I've been doing that for 23. How old was I? I've been doing that for 23 years up until that point. It was face the dragon without the certainty of what's going to happen. And what that was facing the parts of myself in this work we call the shadow that I despised, I disgusted, I could not accept was true in me. But what was so beautiful about the chaos and the dragon, let's just say, is I never had to slay the dragon. I ride the dragon now.
That's right.
I befriended it. It wasn't necessarily a part of me. It was a part of my behavior that had to die, but it was something that I was able to acknowledge through guidership, through therapy, through I-groups. And we've mentioned I-groups a lot. For those listening that don't know what an I-group is, it's called an integration group. It's a group where men that have been through the New Warrior training or intend to go through the New Warrior training adventure can connect, can take the tools that they got from the weekend and learn how to use them. Yeah. Right? There's no weekend seminar where you're jumping up and down, raising your hands in the air, and then come Tuesday, it's like, yeah, cool, take the trash out. Right. These groups are so that you can keep that work integrated. So just some context there. But it was the I group where I did the messiest stuff. The messiest stuff wasn't me gripping, white knuckling my steering wheel, pointing it at a palm tree. No, it was in circle with men that loved and cared about me enough to not let me run away from the question I didn't want to answer. Right. It was in the chaos. It was in the nitty gritty. It was in the ugly. And the valleys have been the greater teacher than the peaks have ever been in my life.
The failures especially. Yeah.
Bingo.
The failures especially. That's the moment of uncertainty, right? I don't know if I can do this. Right? You literally see it. I don't know if I can do this. And if you stay in that long enough, then it does become a dragon that eventually breathes fire. And that's the difficulty thing. It breathes fire for you. It breathes fire for other people. But I love what you said about riding the dragon. And that's what I think the integration group is all about, right? It's about integrating these parts of ourselves that may have been hidden or in the shadows and the darkness for some time that we may not have wanted to admit to ourselves, but that have been driving us in some way. And then also being able to see them as how they can be useful. I know for me, there are two shadows in particular that I wrestle with. One is anger, right? I think that's just a natural disposition of mine, as I'm sure it is for a lot of guys. I couldn't tell you specifically why, other than that's how I'm built, right? It's an emotion. It's a strong emotion of mine. Some people are strong in sadness. Some people are strong in happiness. Some people are strong in disgust, right? Some people are strong in fear. I'm strong in anger in that way. But learning how to channel it in ways that were really appropriate and that were actually useful, not only to me, but to society and to the other people in my life, right? I can come across as a parent, right? When I'm protective of my children, I've learned how to channel that in a way that not only protects them, but gets the message across. And so sometimes, you're dealing with a teacher who doesn't always understand your children, and that can be upsetting in some way. But I've never spoken more clearly and more articulately than I do when I'm with my child's teacher. And it's because in some ways I feel a little bit of anger and a little bit of protectiveness over them because I want for them to have the best. But I also don't want to alienate the teacher and make it an uncomfortable experience for my own kid. So learning how to channel that anger has become a dragon that I enjoy riding in some ways. And I'm sure as an athlete, you know what it is to channel anger, to really put it into something, right? When you're playing with anger as a force in the most appropriate ways, you can do unimaginable things. And maybe it's anger at people doubting you and not thinking that you could become the best, right? Maybe it's, anger at having lost the championship the previous year and now coming back and wanting the championship. Remember LeBron James, when he first won the championship for LA, said he wanted his damn respect. There's anger behind that. There's anger by the fact that nobody thought he could do it. And so he asked for it. He knew how to channel it in the right way, and he got the championship. And then he demanded it in the end in a way that other people could really hear it. For me, there are times where I think other people think I'm stupid. Right. And I don't know necessarily where that comes from. Maybe that comes from, a grandfather wound in some way of hearing that language when I was a young kid. Right. And internalizing it. But what I know is that I'm not. And in some ways, that shadow motivates me maybe to overcompensate at times, right? And to put more out there than I really need to. But at the same time, right, it reminds me that I really am smart and that I have amazing capabilities to learn and to integrate that new information and to grow and to become wise, simply because I have a little reminder that says you really are beautiful and smart and not stupid. But it takes, I think, going to those groups and being in concert with other men who see you and who love you in that way and who are willing to go to those deep, ugly parts with you to say, I've been here before and I know the way out, right? Or I'm at least willing to walk with you out of it so that you can see really how great and powerful you are, regardless of your shadows, and to see all the more so how those shadows can make you even more beautiful.
Absolutely. You're giving me a perspective just in this conversation. This is why I love these conversations where who knows where this episode will land because we have a couple coming in.
Sure, yeah.
But at the time of recording this, we're 57 episodes in the podcast. And I get these opportunities to connect with people like yourself, Noam, that shift my perspective. And I'm going to shift it right now.
Let's hear it.
7 years, I've said that the men in my I group saved my life. I'm changing it to I saved my life with the guidance of the men in my I group.
There you go.
I saved it by being willing, definitely not wanting, but willing to go into the cave and face the dragon and pull up the uncomfortable, nitty gritty, dirty. See, anger's the low hanging fruit for you. Man, it's shame for me.
Yeah.
And shame in my mind is the stickiest, sludgiest, mud up to your knees kind of emotion. I mean, I can get the anger part and the anger part, God, there's a catharsis to it that is fantastic.
Yeah.
But there's nothing about shame to me that I can get a kick out of other than the introspection that comes with it. But if I could just wave a magic wand, it'd be for anyone who's looking for that support and guidance is to find a group near you. And we have links for them in the show notes, of course. But no, I really, really mean that, is to find the guidance of others, to find solace in men, to help guide you through whatever it is that you're going through. Because shit, it could have definitely gone another way, and we certainly wouldn't be having this conversation right now if it wasn't for the guidance of those men. I can tell you that.
And certainly so many, one of the things that I appreciate about the I group is how it strips us of religion and political affiliation and even family name in some way. Not that those things don't matter, but that those are also boxes and structures that other people have placed on us, which we may not necessarily have chosen for ourselves. And it's about coming to learn to define yourself in your own way. And since all the other guys buy into that as well, they're there with the same understanding that those things are important, right? Religion and political affiliation and jobs and family name and all that stuff, but they're not really what matter here, right? What really matters is who you are and what you want in your life.
Yeah. Beautifully said. I've said that a lot today.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Beautifully said, mate. I'm just keeping the compliments going your way. If words of affirmation is love language, you're welcome.
I appreciate that. I do feel loved. Thank you.
The one question I haven't asked you that I wanted to, which may just open a can of worms and may just very well be the reason to get you back on.
Let's do this.
In the near future. Is the traditional role of man throughout society, throughout various cultures and religions, of course, there has been an expectation that has been placed on men and women because, and I'm not going to include non-binary people because that's not been a part of the conversation if we're looking in the background on a macro level so much.
Sure.
It is now.
Right.
What were the expectations, the traditional expectations that may still very well be at play today within the Jewish faith of man? And then I have a question to follow that with.
Certainly. And also saying that the Jewish faith has, I think, taken a lot of steps to be far more progressive and welcoming and including of non-binary individuals, but isn't perfect. Right. There's still broad swaths of the Jewish community that aren't comfortable with it and haven't figured out exactly how to be welcoming and loving to that community. But certainly there is a conception for the longest time, only men were rabbis. Right. And it really wasn't until the mid 80s in which women became ordained. And even then it moved pretty slowly. There still aren't a lot of positions where women hold the highest senior rabbi position. Right. That's still not equal yet. And certainly not dominated entirely by women. It's still primarily dominated by men. And I think the other thing that's also really clear, and I do think this impacts women as well, although I think women have done a far better job at standing up against it, is a general patriarchal attitude towards what the role of a rabbi looks like as defined by what it means to be a man. And that is to say that you go through the whole experience not, trying to engage with the pain involved. You go through the whole experience, embracing the long and the exhausting hours with it, right? There's certainly the image of the father as a rabbi still leaving the home, right? And their children still see that. Children still feel deprioritized in the context of needing to play the role of rabbi. There have been plenty of times when I've encountered rabbis who were mentors of mine that suggested that I should be a Superman, right? They're servicing people at all hours of the day, regardless of my own condition, simply because they needed it. And then to be that provider, right, is what it all really comes down to. And so the role of the rabbi has been heavily dominated, influenced by the idea of what it means to be a man in a really traditionally patriarchal way. And I think it's impacted us not necessarily for the better. I actually think it's been hugely detrimental to a lot of us, not only personally, but also in relation to our families as well. And only now there are conversations opening up about what would the rabbinate look like if it weren't under such a patriarchal system. Right? If it was one that respected our own personal time more and our own sense of personal health, and certainly the fact that we have families that we want to attend to and be with, and also not taking on the perspective of needing to solve everyone's problem or be a superhuman in that way, right? Even if you haven't experienced a lot of loss in your own life personally as a rabbi, you still experience a lot of it professionally. And that's part of the beauty of what I do enjoy about being a rabbi is that you get this whole perspective on life, right? From cradle to grave and everything in between. But you certainly do a lot more funerals at times than you do of others. And to simply go through those and not emote and not process those experiences because of some type of patriarchal model that says you need to be strong and stoic and emotionless is actually very dangerous, right? I don't know that it impacts us the same of harming ourselves in the long run or even in the short run with something like suicide. But at the same time, it definitely doesn't do us any favors, I think it cuts us off in a lot of ways that are just completely unhealthy.
It's so great to hear your perspective on such a pressing and relevant issue right now, especially the conversation that's happening around manhood, masculinity.
Yeah.
What is healthy masculinity? What is, of course, toxic masculinity has been thrown around quite willingly these days. So I love to hear your perspective, and I'm grateful and hopeful to hear your openness.
Yeah.
In saying that as well, and talking about the need for us to progress, move forward, change some of those, break down some of those old molds and structures and boxes that, that many religions have put expectations on their congregations, on their communities around. And so it's really refreshing to hear you say that. And with the awareness that there are a lot of others as well that are doing this as well, that are moving in that direction, that are starting to open their minds and change the narrative, the overall narrative. So that's really important. And so I'm grateful to hear you say that. But mate, you got
Appreciate
2
that.
podcasts, single dad of 2.
3 podcasts, actually. I should have said that at the beginning. 3, yeah.
3 podcasts. Okay. Gosh, this one alone keeps me busy enough.
Tell me about it, my friend. I know.
I want to ask you, mate, what gets you most excited these days?
So what gets me out of bed is certainly this creative bug I'm feeling, in terms of what can I create today? That's certainly something I feel legitimately. And it started with the podcast, but it's moved on to other things. And sometimes it's just a matter of a new relationship with someone, right? How can I reach out and really connect with someone? Because there's something beautiful about that. And I mean that platonically, right? That's not a romantic thing. It's a matter of saying, who can I really contact and who can I really create or at least connect with, right? Because that, I think, fuels creativity. And then part of it is also just about being a really good teacher and a really good dad. And those things can be simultaneous and often interchangeable, right? As I teach in an elementary school, there are plenty of fatherly, techniques and traits that come out. And as I father my own children, right, there are plenty of teachable moments that we have, and times where I have to be more of a teacher than I am a father. But I think that's kind of the beauty of it, is that they overlap between the role of parent and teacher. And so those are things that really kind of get me going in the morning, is how can I embrace that stuff? And trust me, like by the end of the day, I'm kitted out. Like I can't all right, I'm done dealing with you, right? Like I'm done being a father and I'm done being a teacher. Like I've said those lessons several times now, whether I'm a father or whether I'm a teacher, right? I'm tapped out. Let me be me, right? Let me just be Noam and not be the teacher and not be the father, because I need to regenerate that way. And then I'll come back to you, right? And then I'll return as the teacher, as the father, or as both, depending on how the circumstance might fit us.
Beautiful. One final question.
Yeah.
So thinking back to a previous guest we had by the name of Martin Root, he wrote a book called Project Heaven on Earth, which I recommend anyone pick up and read. And guess what? You don't have to believe in heaven to read it. It's really, really
That's good to know.
And so he has this question, you've got a magic wand in your hand, you can wave the magic wand and you can create what heaven on earth looks like for you. And there's 2 other questions that follow, but the one I want to ask you is, Noam, magic wand in your hand, you got it?
I got it, yeah.
There you go. Give it a wave. What does heaven on earth look like for you, mate?
Oh, man. I think at the very least it begins, or at least includes in it, 9 to 10 hours worth of sleep at night, uninterrupted. I think it involves a deliciously hot meal every time I sit down at the table. And I think it involves also just wonderful time with my children. And being able to spend time with them that is uninterrupted by anything, whether it is an emotion that I'm feeling or something external from me that, is bothering me at that moment, and something that, enables me to really just kind of spend time with them in the depths of that moment so I can experience it as deep as I possibly am. And with that, let me just say I have one of them knocking on the door, so just give me 1 second. What's up? Almost. I'm almost there with you, okay? How much minutes? I probably like 10. We're arguing over who gets to play the video games right now, so there's time limits.
Hey, I'm not editing that out, by the way, because the
No, go right
timing of
ahead.
that was perfect, right? A chance to be Noam and not be the teacher or the dad. And so with all that being said, Noam, here's your moment. Spotlight's on you, cameras on you, shameless plug. What is it that you would like, or what is the call to action that you would like to call our audience into, and how can they find out more about you?
So the call to action I'd like to provide to people is to really take a look at your life and ask yourself, where are you? Right? You don't need God or anyone external to you doing that, right? What you need is simply to take the opportunity to say, where am I? And how's it going? And do I enjoy this journey that I'm on? You know, is it a deliberate one that I'm taking? Am I wandering in some type of boundless area? Did I come from a position of being really narrow, or was I in a really narrow place? What does it look like now? Am I lost? Or do I have some type of guide in there? And am I asking further questions of myself? So that would be the call to action I would put out there to people, right? And if that's a call that you feel like answering, reach out to me, and I'm happy to discuss that with you in some way. But where are you right now is the call to action that I would provide. Yeah.
Well said. Well
Thank you.
said. Now, you can find out more about Noam through his website, noamraucher.com. We'll make sure that is in the show notes, as well as I've got two of his podcasts here, the Hugh Man podcast and Jews with Tattoos. We'll make sure, of course, that third one. What is it called?
It's called, I may have left it out in my own notes to you. It's called the Jewish Divorce Project. And that can be found on Instagram and on Facebook. Just the Jewish Divorce Project on Spotify and on iTunes as well.
Wow. Can't wait to hear the fourth podcast.
Oh, it's brewing. Trust me, I got some ideas there.
99 problems, and it's all podcast editing.
That's exactly right. There should be a shirt for that.
Yeah, call it that. All right. Well, want to thank you for joining us, mate. This has been such a pleasure to spend this time with you. I can now finally say I've interviewed a rabbi.
There you go.
That's pretty cool.
I appreciate that, Brandon. It's a pleasure being here with you. Thanks for such great questions.
Oh, mate, pleasure is mine. And for those of you listening at home, thank you again for turning up each week for the Mankind Podcast, the show where we break the molds of modern manhood to prove there's more than one way to be a man, and there's more than one way to be a rabbi.
Exactly. Cool that's the part I really appreciate. That's what I'm going to get on a t-shirt now.
Perfect. Awesome. And just lastly, I want the rabbi t-shirt to have like almost like a Big Lebowski-esque kind of silhouette, and have that breakfast burrito in one hand.
You got it, man.
Maybe rocking some curls as well. I think
you got it. I'll take the breakfast burrito, and I'm pretty sure there already is a Big Lebowski shirt that says "I don't roll on Shabbos," so I'll co-op that one.
There you go. Awesome. Thank you all for listening and tuning in. Noam, we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Brandon. Pleasure being here.
Well, there you have it, another powerful episode of the Mankind Podcast. I'd like to thank Rabbi Noam Raucher for joining us today and giving us the wisdom from his experiences in a very insightful conversation that I know I've taken away a ton and been able to apply into my personal life. So thank you to him. If you want to find out more about Rabbi Noam, head to noamraucher.com. That's NOAMRAUCHER.com. There will be links in the show notes where you can follow him and find out more about his coaching practices. And yeah, thank you. Thank you, the listener, for joining us on this journey. We just cracked 40,000 downloads. Thank you. That's amazing. Absolutely amazing. And last month alone, we hit 5,000 for that month. So the show really is starting to rocket off, and it wouldn't be possible if it wasn't for all of you. So thank you again. And I thought I'd just take a moment to share one of the ratings that we just received on the show from Davey T. He says, "I wish there were more podcasts on this topic with this approach, having a balanced and thoughtful view on manhood. There are plenty of views, opinions, and experiences from reputable guests. Thank you, Brandon and the team. I'm hooked and following closely." Well, thank you, Davey. I appreciate the rating and review. What I want to do going forward is to highlight those of you that have taken the time to rate the show, because it does so much for our show. The more ratings we get on iTunes, the more likelihood that these messages and the messages from our guests are going to reach the people that need it, right? The communities and the families that require some of this information for their growth journey. And so if you would like to be featured in a future episode, please, if you wouldn't mind taking the time to go to the show notes, and you'll find a link where you can leave an iTunes review for the show. And of course, I'm not asking for the obligatory 5-star rating. If it's 4 stars, it's 4 stars. We love your feedback. Again, Thank you to those that have, and I'm grateful for all of you that take the time to do this going forward. Anywho, that's enough from us here at the Mankind Podcast, the show where we're breaking the molds of modern manhood to prove there's more than one way to be a man, and I believe we did that today in this episode. Lots of love, and we'll see you next week. This has been another episode of the Mankind Podcast, produced in association with the Mankind Project USA. We have been your hosts, Paul Newell, Boyson Hodgson, and myself, Brandon Clift, and we want to thank our guests for joining us today and imparting their wisdom from their experiences in this amazing journey called life. If you want to find out more about today's guests and support them in their mission, you can find links to them in the show notes. Now, if you have found gold and insights that you believe could benefit your loved ones and those you care about, be sure to share it with them. And of course, we are always grateful for a rating and review of the show on iTunes. Now, we've got to give special thanks to our back-end team, producer, editor, and audio ninja for the show, Michael J. Russer, and Don Huff, who takes care of our graphics and promotions and pretty much makes us look pretty. So, of course, thank you, Don. Now, above all else, we've got to thank you, the listener, because through your attention and your support, you have made it possible for us to let men all over the world know that they are not alone and that there is more than one way to be a man. And if something in this episode has touched you, then perhaps it is the call to action to get involved in men's work. With live trainings happening constantly and in-person trainings happening all over the world, the Mankind Project definitely has something for you. Now, if you've enjoyed the music in this episode and all of our episodes, be sure to check out Jim Donovan and the Sun King Warriors. I have links to them in the show notes. And lastly, just know, what it means to me to be a man is completely different than what it means for you. What it means for Paul, what it means for Boyson, that is the beauty of this journey. So if you are looking for guidance, support, and community as you begin to unpack and dive deeper into your men's work journey, then you know where to find us. Same place, same time, next week. Lots of love. We'll see you then.